However you do content, make sure it's completely different than how you answer a client question or not.
This is the perfect RIA, in case you didn't know. Bringing you all the strategies to help your business grow. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Sit back and listen in while you feel the beat, yeah. Another myth bites the dust.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA Podcast. I'm your co-host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me, as usual, the man, the myth, the legend, Micah Shalansky. Micah, how are you?
Jarvis, fantastic. Been so long since we've done a pod, bud.
It is. Well, for those of you who listened last week, which is, of course, everyone in the industry, Mike and I are together here in Las Vegas, my hometown, as we are preparing for a mastermind, and we're just whipping out a couple of podcasts before the mastermind starts.
You know, I do have to say, Jarvis, when I introduced you to living in Seattle or Washington before, you never really claimed that it was like back in my hometown. So you have a lot more passion about Vegas than I think Washington.
Well, so the trick with that is if you say you're from Washington, everyone assumes you're from Washington, D.C.
Correct.
And so you have to say Seattle because that's what's on the map. But Seattle is such a flaming pile of whatever it is, you didn't really want to be associated with that. So
fair enough.
Though I have heard that on occasion, when a mutual friend of ours, my brother Stephen Jarvis, host of Retirement Tax Services, visits you in Alaska, you're quick to point out to everyone who already has a disdain. Anyone in Alaska has disdain for the state of Washington. Never mind, that's where all their goods and services come from. For a disdain for the state of Washington, this is my friend Stephen from Seattle.
Yeah, I'm not able to deny that at this time. I'm not confirming that. The laughter is by far, but yes, moving on.
Moving on. Well, with that great intro, let's talk about creating valuable content.
You know, Jarvis, this is one of the questions that I get from the advisors on our team, right? As you know, we have a growing practice, which is just amazing. Not only by new clients come on, we're bringing on new advisors. New to us advisors, right?
Yes.
So advisors have some great experience. They've joined our team and really helping them grow. In several ways we've done that. One is we come up with the perfect week, which is a little bit of an outline of, hey, these are things that we should be doing outside of Surge. Now, it's a concept in there, right? So if you're one of our Backstage Pass and Invictus members, you're welcome to get a copy of that. Make it work for you, right? Yes. It's an outline. It's not the gospel. But one of the things in there is a lot of content because a lot of these advisors want to grow their practice. And so we do a lot of written content, but also video content. And one of the things we want to jumpstart right away is getting people used to being on camera, right? Whether it's on a podcast, correct, whether it's in a video, whether it's a webinar, right? But getting people used to being in front of that camera, because if you've never done it, it's a bit daunting when that red light comes on.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, it's sort of like the Men in Black. Do you remember that old Will Smith movie where they would flash the red light and it would wipe everybody's brain? Yep. That red light is like that. In fact, it might in fact be that it wipes from your brain whatever you thought you were going to say, whatever you were going to do, it all just goes away.
So that's something you really got to think about. Now, when I'm working with advisors, and I know Alex in your office does a great job in producing content
correct,
as well.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel like they want to create a whole different way, a whole new way of answering questions that they get because they're doing it in front of a camera versus how we would do it in front of a client.
Yeah, and this creates a couple of problems. One, you've never practiced this, right? So it comes across as very scripted. Often you end up rambling, and then it's not the experience that the client's going to have. So if they listen to your podcast, right, again, our good friend Benjamin Brandt, who we love to talk about, when people meet him in person after listening to his podcast, they can finish his sentences. Mike, same with you. When they come in from PYFR, planning your federal retirement, they know the jokes. They know how this is going to go because it's a consistent experience. And
they still laugh. So pity or actually funny, probably pity, but either way, I still get a laugh, so it works.
No, I love that. So what we want to do here then is start with, and this is always the best place to start with content. Start with what you're actually doing with real clients. We've talked about this often, that you never want to truncate or abbreviate or otherwise summarize a client's question for your content. It needs to be word for word, no matter how absurd to you it may seem, right? The client may say, hey, with Secure 2.0, do I still need estate documents? Secure 2.0 really has nothing to do with estate documents. That becomes the topic of your video, of your podcast, whatever. It needs to be word for word, almost syllable for syllable what the client's saying.
Now, sometimes when we get questions, maybe there's a question submitted online.
Sure.
And we choose to either write an article about that or do some content about it. Some of the pushback that we get is saying, I don't have enough information. Like, I don't know what they're asking. It could be this, it could be that, right? And I'm like, well, true. Right? So in a real client meeting, we would ask more questions, right? We said, tell me a little bit about that, or interesting, like, how do you mean? Or what's your strategy for this, right? We would ask some more engaging questions with the client. Well, we don't have that. What we have is the information that's in front of us, and then we just have to answer the question the way we see fit. Now, the way I like to do that, Jarvis, I'd love your feedback on this as well, is I fill in the blanks with information. Right? For the question I'm trying to answer. Now, is it the real question that they're going for? Okay, I don't know because I only have so much information, right? But for the purposes of creating content, this is where I think their question is going. Based on that, I'm going to put in the facts that are missing from the story in order to make sure the answer makes sense. And more importantly, I want to show people how I came up with that answer.
Yeah, this allows you to tell a story, if you will, with the gaps, right? So their question is whatever it is. Should I turn on Social Security at 62? Boy, that depends on a lot of factors. So we can then say, hey, I've had a client recently asked, should I turn on my Social Security at 62 or wait? Well, if we were sitting down face to face, there's a couple of additional questions. And of course, whoever you're working with, I'm sure they're going to ask these same questions. If they don't, you're going to want to think about X and Y and Z. And so it lets me take them on a journey because any content is a journey. Some of them are a very haphazard journey that's difficult to follow, like a white paper or something like that. And then some of them, like reading a fiction novel, right, they're very fun, they're follow. And so the better you can tell a story through your content, the more it's going to be enjoyed.
You know, and if we have the opportunity to put pictures in, I'm all about it. Not photo stock pictures, not 10 hours of graphic details and graphic artists. Everyone cringes at my pictures, but it works, right? It's very simple drawings, whether it's a buckets, whether it's a timeline, whether it's a tax buckets, right? Some very simple concept that people can follow along with, and then they can use that as a template and put their own information in.
Yeah. Another thing we have to remember, and Stephen Pressfield does an amazing example of this in his book, The War of Art, not to be confused by The Art of War, also an interesting book, but The War of Art. He calls it resistance, we call it head trash, and he says, hey, the best way to get past this is endless repetitions. He was a writer specifically, and so he says, write for the garbage can. And he quoted other famous authors. Someone once asked the legendary author Stephen King, when does inspiration strike? Or Stephen King says, hey, I only write when inspiration strikes, and it strikes me every morning at 8 a.m. Even that time he had gotten hit by a minivan, which he later bought, oddly enough, in the hospital, when he came to, he immediately said, bring me a pen and paper, at least according to legend, so that I can resume the creative process. So it's putting in those repetitions. The same goes for videos or podcasts or anything else.
Yeah, you got to do it right now. It's great if you can set things up for your success. Like, when are you on a high energy level? When are you excited about being in front of the camera, right? All of these things. So knowing your peak performance schedule is really, really important, but then document it. It can't be, and I know that great thing on Stephen King, right? It's every morning at 8 a.m., right? So what he was going is saying, more than likely, now I'm reading into this, what was the time that he was in the most creative space was in the mornings. Yep. Therefore, he had to make an appointment with himself to make sure he got that done. What's the same? That's the formula. So now we apply that formula to us, right? What time are you in the most creative space? For me, it's not the afternoons, right? Short of me getting out of a surge meeting and just being jazzed up and you want to do like a quick 5-minute video, on the normal, I am not super excited about doing content in the afternoons, right? Does that make me a horrible person? Well, not for that reason. And so I needed to earmark this and do it in the morning because that's what works for me. I have other people that I talk to that says, man, I can really do better content at 3, 4 in the afternoon. Well, rock on. Perfect. I don't know how you do that, but if that's your time, then do it.
Yeah, we often get caught on this idea, again, of I'm going to wait until inspiration strikes me. Yes. Nope, that has to be scheduled, but there are things that you can do to invoke the muse, so to speak, or to foster that innovation or that creativity, and you need to know what those are. So, Micah, for example, you and I, we often text over the weekend on, hey, what do you want to talk about on our podcast? We record these every Monday morning, and so to get those ideas flowing, or we'll keep a rolling list of possible topics, right, of things that we've heard, that advisors have asked, that we've run into the practice. For me, if I try not to do anything before we record our podcast, if I try to get in and get some work done real quick before the podcast, it distracts me. I'm not in a creative space. So look for those things that make you creative and then set yourself up for success.
So on that note, have a place to write these topics down, right? For you and I, we just text these things back and forth. But how many times have we gone to it where we haven't chose to text back and forth? Like, oh man, I want to do a podcast on this and I can't remember what it was. Then halfway through the podcast, we remember. Not super helpful. So you got to have a space that you can write that information down. I won't tell you where it is to write that down, but I'll tell you where it's not. It is not in your email. Why is it not in your email? Because then you're going to go into your email and you're going to see everything else that's going on. It is not in your email, right? I use to-dos on my phone. I use the notes on my phone, right, as easy places that I can throw things in there. Now, I don't put my honey-do list inside of there. I don't put the stuff I got to do at my house inside of there. These are just my creative ideas, whether it's on PYFR or TPR, etc. So there's that space I can go to that's not distracted by anything else and put those ideas in.
Yeah, and part of that also ties to when you're in content creation zone or time, the scheduled time, you need to remove as many barriers of entry as you can, right? This is why we often advocate for what's the simplest approach, right? Grab your iPhone and hit record from your iPhone. What can reduce barriers of entry? If you have to go through an elaborate process, turning on multiple lights and cameras and microphones and making sure the batteries are there and the memory cards in there, it's been formatted and all this stuff, each one of those is taken away from creativity. It's giving you an excuse to stop.
Jarvis is just making fun of my process, by the way, in case you didn't catch up on that. That's what it is. But I'm working on it.
Yeah, right. And another piece, and I was recently talking to an advisor about this, is if you know anybody who is doing the creative process, see if you can mirror them, right? Now, this isn't call somebody you've never met and say, hey, can I stop by your house and watch you record? But if you know an advisor who's doing a podcast or doing a video series, and there's some way you can get in front of them. In fact, later this week at our personal mastermind, we're writing a very large check to spend an hour with a very prominent content creator to get insights from him on how do you do that? How does this process work? That's something we've done several times.
Yeah, really important to bring that together and say, yeah, how does this actually work? How do we put all of these little pieces together? And when we meet with this guy and look at his content, I am sure he is not going to say anything that's like explaining rocket science, right?
No.
But he has probably found, and I'm not trying to degrade him at all. I mean, he's doing a much better job than I am,
Yeah.
but he's found a system and he follows that system. So what I need to task myself with when we go to meet with him is not to let my ego get in the way, not to let my mind jump into that works for him, but it won't work for me. I need to get into that space of what if it works?
Yeah.
What if what he's saying actually works? What if I followed it? And what if I got half the results that he got? A quarter of the results that he got, right, would be amazing.
The Perfect RA challenges financial advisor to answer the question, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Surround yourself with financial advisors who share your common values and goals towards success. The advisor is you. The time is now. Don't be like most people who fail to take action and achieve their dreams. Go online today at theperfectraa.com and decide what type of financial advisor you plan to be.
Yeah, we did that early on with John Lee Dumas, right? Very first when we started the podcast, we said, boy, who are the top podcasters in the industry or just in general? And let's reach out to them and let's get some insights. Now, a question, Micah, that comes up with content creation is which channel or which medium should I use? And I always say it's the one that's the least painful for you. If you think there's a medium that's always going to be all green lights and fairies and unicorns, that doesn't exist. Like you're kidding yourself.
You mean it's Twitter, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
Go on Twitter, yeah.
Yeah, no. And so one of the things that I would add to that is what's the lowest barrier of entry?
Yes.
But you got to have a close second on that one is where's your audience at?
Yes.
Because if something could be a very low barrier to entry, but if your audience isn't there, it doesn't matter, right? So where's your audience going or where are they at? And you need to make sure those two align.
What would you, if you were going to rank on ease of implementation, right? We've worked across a lot of different platforms. I would think that podcast is the relative easiest, but it's not easy, right? And video is definitely the hardest, but there's this whole realm in between. But to your point, where's your audience? Now, how do you find out where your audience is, right? You talk to people that are in that audience and you ask them, hey, what kind of resources do you look at when you have a question about your federal retirement? Where do you go to look? Oh, I go to YouTube. Oh, interesting. Or I listen to a podcast. Right. So it'd be nice to be the first person in a space. And I guess somebody has to be the first person. I want to go where there's success, right? That old thing about why do you rob banks? It's where the money is.
Well, someone's constantly telling me I need to get in VR and create a VR space on federal employee benefits. So have not done that yet, but maybe you want to be the first one in that space to do it. But I love that concept. Go to your audience and ask them.
Just ask them.
Where do they get their information? Where do they learn from? What are their trusted sources? And then start creating a platform that's like that. Then how do you be on those platforms that's there, right?
Yes.
Podcasting in some ways is easy because you just got to get in front of a microphone and the iPhone microphone works great. Then on other sides, it's more complex because you got to air it, you got to get it out, you got to have an email sequence, right? People got to find your podcast.
Yeah.
So there is no easy answer. The question is, what are you going to work?
Yes. And this is where we go back when talking about work is the scheduling that time and scheduling the number of repetitions that you're going to do, right? If you're saying, hey, I'm going to do this every Monday from 8 a.m. to noon, that's my content creation time. Inside of that, we need to have a very specific outcome that we can control, right? Is that I'm going to record 4 episodes, even if I delete all 4 of them, because you can block that time and then spend those 4 hours just doing nothing. Let me research this. Let me type this up. Let me retype it. Let me adjust my lighting. Let me check my sound levels, right? You can burn up all that time. So having a block of time is the first step, but it's not the final step either.
Yeah, and if you're going to do video production, even audio production, I think what I would say is I wouldn't even worry about audio, lighting, cameras, or anything else that's playing office. Turn it on. Your first 15 episodes are going to suck anyways.
Yeah.
So turn it on. Turn the camera on. Get through at least 10 or 15. Then start worrying about it. Now, you don't have to air those 10 or 15, right? Maybe they're writing for the trash can.
Yeah.
So, but maybe you do just need to record those and you need to get to a level. And that's one of the things we're working out with some of the advisors in our office. They're like, hey, we haven't used a lot of my videos. It's like, no, because they're not production worthy.
Yes.
I was like, but it's a dress rehearsal and you're going to keep doing a dress rehearsal until you're ready for game day. And this isn't game day material yet. And so we got to have clear standards on what game day is on the other side of it, right? Because we can't make this like a someday aisle, right? Some days will be good enough, I'll air them and you're doing all the work and not getting any benefit. So you definitely have to come out of your comfort zone at one point and push publish, even though it's not the best it possibly could be.
Yeah, and it's best if you've got some third party that can let you know that. So again, let's use podcasts as an example. There's a lot of relatively inexpensive podcast production sources, even just individual people who will do that. And you need to pass off that criteria to them. So Micah, with your team, you can be the judge of that, right? One, it's your channel, it's your business, right? Whether it's objective or not, you can be the judge of that. If you don't have somebody that can be that judge, you need to find that person. It could be a peer. Again, it could be a production company. The reason for that is you will often be far too critical to yourself, and then you'll swing to the opposite extreme where you'll kid yourself. And you'll go from throwing away every episode to throwing away none of the episodes. And you need someone to push back and say, hey, those last 3 episodes, you just rambled on those. They weren't coherent. There wasn't a call to action. Your sound quality was bad because you didn't notice your microphone broke, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and that's going to happen too. Your camera's going to break midway through it and you're not going to know it until the podcast is done, until the video's done. So welcome to production.
Another thing we need to remember is that content production, good content production, is extremely, extremely difficult. How do we know that? Because so few people produce good content, right? I don't recall the statistics off the top of my head, but there are 1 gazillion podcasts out there, but there's only just a handful any of us can name. It's because it's that difficult. Starting a podcast isn't that hard. That's why there's 1 gazillion of them. Getting a podcast that people listen to, that find value in, same with newsletters, email sequences, whatever the case may be, the barrier to entry is very low, but the barrier to having quality content people want to consume is very high.
So the goal behind this is you got to create a platform to create content, whether it's written, audio, or video, right? What is that platform that you're going to consistently create content? Then get out there and just do it. So this podcast is all about action items. So Jarvis, what do you think the first action item this should be?
First action item, block the time. Block the time. And again, as we said, when you say block the time, right, I'm 8 a.m. to noon. That's the only thing I'm going to work on, right? Every Monday from 8 to noon, that's the only thing I'm going to work on. And I'm going to do it as manual as I possibly can. That can be just a sheet of paper and a pencil. It could be my iPhone with a record button. It is going to be as simple as it possibly can be. I can always catch back up with complexity, but otherwise complexity almost always turns into plain office.
I love it. I'm going to add the second action item on there, very similar, is create a content calendar. When is your production going to air, whether it's written content, video content, audio, whatever? When is it going to air, and what is it going to be about? Why is this handy? Because then when you're at a little bit of a lull spot or a dry spot, saying, boy, what do I write about? What do I talk about? You can look at your content calendar when you had creative energy and say, aha, here's some topics and here's questions I need to answer.
Action item number 3, as we always say, learn from those who are doing, not from those who dream. I think I like that expression, from doing, not those who dream. Whatever medium you're going to go to, find the person who's a level or 2 or 10 levels ahead of you and figure out how to learn from them. Some of these people sell courses. You can watch their training online or listen to their podcasts, but find someone who's several levels above you and learn from them. But come to them, Micah, be curious your thoughts here, come to them as a student, right? So when you come to somebody who's several levels ahead of you in the game, this is not your time to critique them. Right, this gentleman we're going to talk to on Sunday, I'm not going to critique his YouTube videos and say, hey, listen, have you ever thought about doing this? Like maybe you should change the lighting a little bit. No, I have no business critiquing. I'm coming as a student. Now, I'm also paying him, but I'm coming as a student. Know your place. Know when you're a student and know when you're the teacher. And your paycheck reflects that. If you're not sure which one you are, look at your bank account and I'll tell you which one you are.
You're the student. And that's really funny because Jarvis is probably talking about that. That happened to me with another advisor is they decided they were critiquing my, video and whatnot. So that's one of the things is, do what works is definitely went back and asked them. So it's great. Well, tell me about your videos. Why don't do any? Tell me about your audience. Why don't have any? What the hell are you talking about? Right? But yeah, no, and this isn't a bad thing in like the know your place aspect of it, but speak from an area of authority. What area are you an expert on? We're not an expert in every area. And when we're not an expert, we're a student and it's time to listen.
Yeah, and I don't want to waste that opportunity. So some of this is as coming from a place of ego as someone who's often in the mentor role. But when I'm in the student role, I don't want to waste that time giving this person unsolicited advice, right? If I'm wasting my time we're wasting their time. That's time I'm wasting, right? If I could be asking them questions and learning from them and soaking in their expertise, why am I wasting that time giving them unsolicited advice?
And I don't want other people wasting that time that now I can't get information from it as well, right? So again, really important to understand that dichotomy.
I love that. Well, for all of those listening, take action on what you're hearing today. Again, it's fun to give it 5 stars and to leave a review, and we really appreciate it. There's more than 400 5-star reviews. We appreciate that. Take action, implement, and until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.
Hold on before we go. Something that you need to know. This isn't tax, legal, or investment advice. That isn't our intent. Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice. Be a better husband, father, mother, and wife. The perfect RIA, the perfect